Hello, everyone, and welcome to Meet a Scientist, sponsored by New Mexico EPSCOR. I'm your host, Anthony Salvano from Explora Science Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Today we have Mallory Waggoner, who is a chemical engineering student at Sandia National Labs, who is also graduating this weekend. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You're getting your PhD, right?
No, my master's degree.
Master's? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the introduction.
Tell us a little bit about what it is to be a chemical engineer.
So, as a chemical engineer, I chose this route because I have directly seen the impacts of climate change on our society and other countries around us that don't have the infrastructure and the means to basically ship it off and sell it to someone else and pretend like it doesn't exist, which is why I chose to become a chemical engineer. I felt really passionate a story. I went to Africa for 3 weeks, and while I was there, I saw just black oceans and tires floating and trash. And so I went and picked up pieces of trash, and I was like, where does this come from? I don't see the locals around here throwing things away onto the ocean. Like, who would do that? So I pick it up and I see pieces of plastic from the United States and grocery bags from Canada. And it clicked to me that as a chemical engineer, it is my job and my responsibility to leave a well taken care of earth for future generations. And even if it's not for humans, it's for all of the other creatures that we share this wonderful planet with.
I love how passionate you are in that story.
Thanks.
So what's one of the most important things that you do in your line of work?
I would say probably researching future technologies and figuring out what is going to be applicable. And as an engineer, we don't just want the technology, but we want to also make sure that it's economical and that it is going to be affordable across the spectrum. So not just for first world countries like the US, but for countries in Africa, South America, Asia, so on and so forth. So I would say that's probably the most important thing, is weighing technology versus cost for the future. Yeah.
When you talk about technologies, describe what kinds of technologies you're referring to.
Sure. So I have done some work with aerosol transports. I've done some research with the transport of organochlorides, which are super toxic, and they move through the atmosphere and into the ocean. The ocean acts as a sink for these chemicals, and then a lot of times animals or oceanic plants will absorb them and it kills them off. And sometimes if there's a mammal in the ocean and they feed their children and they were exposed to these, their children will have very high levels and can't always make it very long. Some other work I've done has just kind of been investigating carbon capture and storage for oil and gas industries, seeing how that will impact the environment and the trade-off of still fracking versus being able to capture some of the carbon, or applying that to factories that are producing a lot of carbon. Some other research I've done has been into future energy technology. So with nuclear reactors, what are the downfalls with a nuclear reactor and how are they applicable in the future? As well as doing a little bit of research with wind turbines and some solar voltaics.
Man, you sound like you just want to save every aspect of the world. So
I think that it's important to research and know about all of the different impacts and all of the different ways. And then you can kind of choose as a person, where do I fit and what can receive the most benefit from me? So I've cast my net wide, and hopefully I'll be able to kind of reel it into a sector that I can really make big impact with.
Yeah, so describe the process of how you got from where you are, from where you were, as a young Mallory to where you are today. Just because I can't imagine, you have this really lofty world-saving goal in your mind, and now you're super focused chemical engineer. So how did you come to where you are?
Sure. So believe it or not, teenage Mallory was not really into saving the world. She was a lot more focused on being pretty and having friends and going to the coolest parties and stuff. So my studies as a high school student they were secondary, maybe even tertiary. But I got pregnant when I was 18 and I was still in high school, and I graduated high school, and it was a really challenging time of my life because that's not where I saw myself going. It wasn't where my parents and my mentors had seen me going. And so I had a lot of conflicting advice. No one really suggested, yeah, keep your child and raise her on your own. That's a great decision. But I know myself, and I knew that that was the right decision for me. So I graduated high school and I began college the very next semester because I had applied for some scholarships, and luckily for me, I had received the lottery and gotten a little of extra scholarship money. And my first year was so challenging, Anthony. Like, I cried all the time. I felt so stressed. I was like, they're right. I can't do this. But I also heard the voice inside of me saying, you can do this, just keep going. And so my sophomore year, I was still kind of undecided of where I was going to go and what I was going to do, but I've always loved physics like you. And so I took a physics class, and I realized this is where I need to be. I love this. And even though it's hard, if I enjoy it, I'll be happier doing something that's challenging, because my situation is going to be challenging no matter what class I'm in. So it was at that point that I switched from being a business Spanish major to being a chemical engineering major. And what that meant for me was basically starting over, because I hadn't taken any STEM classes. I hadn't taken math, chemistry, just the one physics class. And so I started over, and I didn't really fall in love with chemical engineering initially, and I didn't exactly know what I was going to be doing as a chemical engineer. I just knew that I would have a lot of opportunities, that I would provide a really great life for my daughter and I after I graduated. And in the meantime, that was enough for me to keep going as a chemical engineer. But as I continued throughout my chemical engineering education, I really developed a support net and a community of fellow engineers that wanted each other to succeed and grow. And this was something that I hadn't experienced in previous classes, and something that I felt was really unique to the discipline. And I'm not saying that other disciplines aren't like this at all. Just this is just my experience. And so I stayed for the friendship, and I stayed for the support, and I stayed for the opportunity. And it wasn't until, I guess, my junior and my senior year that I became really passionate about climate issues, because that was when I transitioned from really general coursework into more specifics. And I saw all of the ways that chemical engineering is specifically applicable to helping the environment and helping basically the problems of my generation.
That's an amazing story. And I hear so much perseverance in that. So if you could go back in time and talk to 10-year-old Mallory, what would you tell her for advice?
That's so hard, because there's nothing in my life that I would change. The hardships, like, you know, we all go through things. And I think when I was 10, it's so hard to think about. I would just tell myself to just enjoy every moment, and not to look too far ahead. I think just be in your moment and enjoy whatever it is that you're enjoying at the time. So I think when I was in sixth grade, I decided that I was going to be a fashion designer. And like, that's fine. Like, I should be a fashion designer in sixth grade, you know, and then maybe 10th grade me wants to do something else. And that's okay too. I think that just being there and being who you are at that moment is okay, whatever that means for you.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And like you said, we all have these meandering paths, and you really allowed yourself to like focus on the short term to just like get yourself through it.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that's good to just focus. I have the cheesiest tattoo on my foot. It says "one step at a time." And I got it when I was 19 because I really needed that reminder, just one step at a time. Like sometimes just take that first step and everything else, all the next steps will be easier. But when you look at that big picture and you see like, oh, I have to do all these hard things and this goal is so unachievable, you'll never get there. So just look at the first thing you need to do that. And then the next thing will be just as small and just as easy to bite off and chew.
And you've obviously accomplished a lot. I mean, going from a fashion designer to a scientist at Sandia National Labs.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with being a fashion designer too. I sometimes like to take that little piece of me to Sandia.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much for doing this.
Yeah,
And
thanks for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
yeah, congratulations on your master's degree. And I look forward to seeing Mallory Waggoner in bright lights at the, whatever institution that the government needs in order to get us out of this mess.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anthony.
Take care, Mallory.